The florist's invoice sat untouched in my drawer for 6 weeks, $47,000 for peonies that would never bloom at my wedding. I hadn't opened it because 3 days after she emailed it, my fiancé walked into our bedroom and handed me back my grandmother's ring. No explanation, just cold silence and packed bags by morning. Before we jump back in, please like and subscribe to our new channel, because here we bring real stories that could save you and change the way you think. Are you subscribed? Thanks you. Let's is back in. That was April. Now it was June, and I was standing in the executive boardroom of Garrison Holdings, signing the final acquisition papers for the Ashford Manor, a sprawling lakeside estate that happened to be fully booked for one very special ceremony this Saturday. Ms. Reeves, are you certain about the timeline? My attorney, Richard, adjusted his reading glasses. Acquiring a property of this magnitude in 72 hours is highly irregular. The previous owners are practically giving it away, but there's still the matter of assuming existing contracts. Every single one, I interrupted, my pen hovering over the signature line. I want complete control of all bookings, all vendor relationships, all deposits, everything. Richard's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline, but he slid the documents closer. Smart man, he'd worked with me long enough to know when questions were unwelcome. I signed my name, Sophia Reeves, across 12 different pages, each stroke more satisfying than the last. The building's previous owner, an elderly couple ready to retire, had jumped at my offer. 48 hours from inquiry to closing. They thought I was impulsive. They had no idea this was the most calculated decision I'd made in months. The current bookings, I said, stacking the papers neatly. I'll need the complete list by tonight. Of course, though I should mention, Richard pulled up his tablet, there's a rather large wedding scheduled for this Saturday. The deposit alone was $85,000. Canceling would likely result in litigation. Let them sue. I stood, smoothing my tailored black pantsuit. I'll be there personally to handle it. Richard's silence spoke volumes, but he nodded. He didn't know about Ethan, didn't know about Victoria. Didn't need to. I did know, however, that my former fiancé had somehow convinced the woman he'd been secretly seeing for God knows how long to marry him at the exact venue we'd toured together 18 months ago. The venue where I'd stood on the terrace overlooking the lake, imagining our first dance. The venue where Ethan had held my hand and whispered, "This is where we'll start our forever." Forever had lasted 6 more months before he handed back the ring with dead eyes and a moving truck. The real revelation came 5 weeks post-breakup, when my younger sister Emma, bless her inability to keep secrets, drunk texted me a screenshot. A Facebook event. Ethan's wedding. To Victoria Sterling, his colleague from the architectural firm. The same Victoria who'd been at our engagement party, smiling over champagne while touching Ethan's arm just a fraction too long. The same Victoria who'd sent a sympathy card to my office after the breakup. So sorry to hear about you and Ethan. Sometimes things just don't work out. They'd set their date for June 15th. Our original date was June 8th, 1 week. That's how long they'd waited to schedule their happiness after destroying mine. What they didn't know. What nobody knew except my attorney, my accountant, and my very discreet financial advisor, was that the freelance interior designer they'd met at various social functions was actually the majority shareholder in Reeves Capital Management. My late father's investment firm, which I'd inherited at 23 and quadrupled in value over 7 years through aggressive acquisitions and strategic real estate holdings. I'd learned early that being a young woman with money made you a target. So I'd created a fiction, Sophia Reeves, the struggling creative who got by on small residential design jobs. I drove a 7-year-old Honda, lived in a modest townhouse in a middle-class neighborhood, wore affordable clothes, and complained about student loans I'd paid off 5 years ago. Ethan had loved that version of me. The one who needed him, who depended on his architect's salary, who'd agreed to a prenup without hesitation because, what did I have to protect anyway? The prenup he'd smugly waved around during our split, ensuring I got nothing from our 3-year relationship except my personal belongings and emotional devastation. He had no idea about the downtown office building I owned, the commercial properties across 3 states, the investment portfolio that generated more in a month than his annual salary, and now, the Ashford Manor. Saturday morning arrived with unseasonable heat, the kind that made tools stick to skin and wilted bouquets before noon. Perfect. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, please like this video, it means a lot to us. Did you liked? Now back to the story. I arrived at the manor at 9 a.m. 3 hours before the ceremony. My car, the Range Rover I actually owned, not the Honda from my performance, rolled up the circular drive. The valets looked confused. The event coordinator, a frazzled woman named Monica, practically ran toward me. "I'm sorry, but the venue is closed today for a private event." "I know." I handed her my business card. The real one. Sophia Reeves, new owner. "We need to talk." Monica's face cycled through confusion, recognition, and panic in about 4 seconds. But the Harrisons owned, as of Wednesday, I own the Ashford Manor and all associated contracts. I kept my voice level, professional. "Please gather your staff in the main office. Now." 20 minutes later, I stood before a semicircle of confused vendors. Monica, 2 assistants, the head caterer, the sound engineer, and the venue's general manager, Paul, who'd clearly been roused from his day off based on the cargo shorts and flip-flops. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'll keep this brief." I placed my leather portfolio on Monica's desk. "I'm the new owner, and I'm exercising my right to cancel today's event. Chaos. You can't. The contract. Legal action." I held up one hand. Silence fell, reluctant but present. The purchase agreement includes a clause allowing the new owner to terminate any booking within the first 30 days with full refund of deposits and documented expenses. I pulled out the relevant pages, already highlighted. The previous owners insisted on it to protect against schedule conflicts with their own family events. "Inconvenient for you all, but perfectly legal. But there's a wedding in 3 hours." Monica's voice pitched high with panic. "The bride and groom, the guests, the flowers are already being set up. Then I suggest you start making phone calls." I turned to Paul. "I want every vendor paid immediately for their services. Full contracts, no penalties. I'll cover it. But I want this venue empty by 2 p.m. This is insane," Paul sputtered. "Do you have any idea what kind of lawsuit? I welcome it." I met his eyes with the full weight of 7 years of hostile board meetings and corporate negotiations. "I have 14 lawyers on retainer who would love the billable hours." "Do you really want to test how deep my pockets go?" Paul's jaw worked soundlessly. "He didn't." "The bride and groom?" Monica tried again, her voice smaller now. "At least let me call them privately. Let them find out before they arrive." "No." The single word dropped like a stone in still water. "They'll find out when they get here," I continued. "You're welcome to try calling, but I've instructed the phone lines be forwarded to my office. Any attempts to reach the venue will receive a recorded message about emergency closure due to new ownership." "That's cruel," one of the assistants whispered. I turned to her slowly. Young, probably early 20s, romantic notions still intact. "You know what's cruel? Having your fiancé leave you 3 months before your wedding with no explanation. Finding out 6 weeks later he's marrying someone else. At your venue? On almost your date." I watched her face pale with understanding. "I'm not here to ruin a wedding. I'm here to reclaim what was already mine." Monica's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God, the groom is Ethan Davidson, isn't he?" "The one who—" "Get to work," I said, cutting her off. "You have 3 hours." They scattered like startled birds, phones already pressed to ears, frantically trying to control the uncontrollable. I walked through the manor's halls, my heels clicking on Italian marble, and stepped onto the terrace. The lake stretched out before me, glass smooth and golden in the morning sun. White chairs sat in perfect rows on the lawn below. A flower-wrapped arch framed the water view. Tulle and ribbons twisted around every available surface, transforming my property into someone else's dream. My phone buzzed, Elena, my actual assistant from Reeves Capital. All personnel in place. Security briefed. Legal team standing by. Are you sure about this? I typed back, absolutely. Another message appeared, this one from my sister. Holy shit, Soph. Mom just got a call from Aunt Helen, who got a call from someone who knows someone at the venue. Is it true? Did you actually buy the place? Tell Mom I'll call her later. You're insane and I love it. Need moral support? I can be there in an hour. I smiled despite myself. Stay home. This is something I need to do alone. The next 2 hours crawled by in a flurry of controlled chaos. Vendors packed up with varying degrees of anger and confusion. The caterer actually thanked me, confessing they'd been stiffed on payment by the couple during menu tastings. I wrote them a check for double their contract value. Consider it hazard pay, I said. The florist was less understanding, hurling accusations about ruining love and karma until my head of security. Yes, I'd brought security, gently escorted her to her van. By 11:45, the venue was stripped clean. Every ribbon, every chair, every fairy light and floral arrangement loaded into trucks and driven away. The Ashford Manor stood empty and silent, waiting. At 12:15, the first guests began arriving. I watched from the second-floor window of the master suite, now converted to my temporary office. Cars rolled up the drive in a steady stream. BMWs, Teslas, one actual Bentley. Ethan's architecture firm friends, clearly. Victoria's corporate crowd. The guests clustered in the parking area, confusion evident in their body language. Phones emerged. Conversations grew animated. The wedding coordinator they'd hired, not Monica, someone external, ran between groups like a shepherd losing her flock. At 12:47, Ethan arrived. My breath caught involuntarily. Stupid, treacherous heart. He looked exactly as he had the day he left. Tall, dark hair styled perfectly. That navy suit he'd bought for job interviews and wedding events. But his face was different now, confused, then annoyed, then genuinely panicked as the coordinator rushed to his car door. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I watched his expression cycle through denial, anger, and disbelief. He pulled out his phone, probably trying to call the venue. The call would go straight to my office voicemail. Victoria arrived 10 minutes later in a vintage Rolls-Royce, clearly rented for maximum effect. The dress visible through the window was everything I'd imagined. Elaborate, expensive, princess-style tulle and lace that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage on the townhouse Ethan thought I could barely afford. The coordinator intercepted her before she could step out fully. I watched Victoria's face through the windshield. Beautiful. Made for magazine covers and Instagram envy, crumble in real time. Ethan stormed to the entrance, the coordinator and 3 groomsmen trailing behind. They pounded on the doors, rang the bell, shouted through the intercom. I waited until the pounding grew desperate, until I could see Ethan's face reddening with rage through the door's side window. Then I walked downstairs, my heels announcing my approach on the marble stairs. I'd changed into a different outfit, a deep emerald dress, designer label, the kind of thing I actually wore to board meetings. My hair was down, makeup perfect, every inch of me screaming money and power. The pounding stopped when the locks clicked open. I pulled the door wide. Ethan's fist was still raised, frozen mid-knock. His eyes met mine and I watched reality shatter behind them. Hello, Ethan. Sophia? His voice cracked on my name. Why are you? Welcome to my venue. I smiled, stepping aside in mock invitation. Oh, wait. You're not actually welcome. This is private property and you're trespassing. Your venue? Victoria appeared behind him, pushing through the groomsmen. Without the car window between us, I could see her makeup was already running. Black mascara tracking through foundation. What the hell are you talking about? I own the Ashford Manor, I said simply. As of Wednesday, and I've canceled your booking. The silence that followed was exquisite. You can't, Ethan started. I can, and I did. I pulled out my phone, showing the screen with property documents. Fully legal. All deposits refunded. Feel free to sue. but I promise you'll lose more in legal fees than you'll ever recover. This is because I left you? Ethan's face twisted into something ugly. You're really that petty? That vindictive? The laugh that escaped me was genuine, sharp-edged. Petty? Ethan, you left me 3 months before our wedding. No explanation, no conversation, just gone. Then you scheduled your replacement wedding for 1 week after what should have been ours, at the venue we chose together, with the woman who pretended to be my friend. I looked at Victoria, who'd gone pale beneath her running makeup. And you're calling me petty? You were holding me back. Ethan exploded. Your lack of ambition, your tiny little design jobs, your complete absence of drive. Victoria understands success. She's a partner at her firm. She has goals. You were content to stay small forever. Small, I repeated, tasting the word. That's what you thought of me. It's what you were. Living in that cramped townhouse, driving that ancient car. Always worried about money. I was never worried about money. Ethan! I pulled out my other phone, the one I used for business, and pulled up my company portfolio. I was protecting it from people like you. I turned the screen toward him. His eyes scanned the information. I watched the exact moment comprehension hit, the property listings, the investment summaries, the corporate holdings. All with my name, my real company, my actual wealth. That's not, you can't. He grabbed for the phone. I pulled it back smoothly. Reeves Capital Management. Founded by my father, inherited by me at 23. Current portfolio value, roughly $340 million depending on the market day. I slipped the phone back in my pocket. The townhouse? I own the building. The car? Tax write-off. The struggling designer act? Research. I wanted to see who you really were when you thought I had nothing. Victoria made a strangled sound. You're lying, am I? I gestured at the manor surrounding us. How do you think I bought this place in 72 hours? The previous owners wanted $4 million. I paid $5 million for immediate closing. Ethan's face had gone from red to white. You... the whole time? The whole time, I confirmed. And that prenup you were so proud of? The one protecting your precious architect's salary? Meaningless. I never needed your money. I needed to know if you loved me or the idea of me. This is insane, Victoria interjected, her voice shrill. You're insane. Who does this? Who plays pretend for years? Someone who's been burned before. I looked at her directly. Someone who learned that people see dollar signs instead of personality. Someone who wanted for once to be loved for who I was and not what I owned. I shifted my gaze back to Ethan. But you couldn't even love the poor version of me, could you? I was still too small. Too content. Too much of an embarrassment. I want to talk to the manager, Victoria demanded. This is harassment. I am the manager. I'm the owner. I'm the board of directors and the sole decision maker. I stepped back into the doorway, and I'm telling you to leave my property. Your deposits have been refunded. Your vendors have been compensated. Consider yourselves lucky I'm not charging you for the emotional damage. Sophia. Ethan reached out, his hand shaking. Please, there are 200 people out there. My parents, Victoria's family, our friends. Then you'd better go explain to them why you're not getting married today. I began closing the door. Shouldn't be hard. Just tell them the truth. You destroyed one woman to upgrade to another, and turns out the first woman owned the stage you wanted for your performance. I loved you. Ethan shouted through the narrowing gap. I paused, met his eyes one last time. No, Ethan, you loved the idea of being someone's hero, someone's provider, someone's salvation. The door clicked shut between us. I never needed saving. I just needed honesty. I turned the lock with a decisive snap. The pounding resumed, louder and more desperate. Voices raised in anger, in pleading, in threats. I walked back upstairs, each step lighter than the last. From my window, I watched the scene unfold like a stage play. Ethan arguing with groomsmen. Victoria crying in the Rolls-Royce. Guests taking photos, posting to social media in real time. The wedding coordinator making frantic phone calls, probably trying to find any available venue on a Saturday afternoon in June. My phone buzzed with a call from Richard. I'm assuming the scene I'm reading about on social media is your doing? It's trending? I couldn't help the small smile. Ashford Manor shutdown is currently number 3 in the region. He sighed, but I heard amusement underneath. You know this is going to generate media attention. Let it. I settled into the window seat, watching Victoria finally emerge from the car, dress hitched up, storming toward her own car in the parking lot. I'm done hiding. Done pretending. If the world wants to see what happens when you push a rich woman too far, they can watch. Your mother called me. Of course she did. She wants you to know she's proud of you, but also mildly concerned about your mental health. I laughed. Tell her I'll call her tonight. Below, the crowd began dispersing. Cars rolled down the drive in a funeral procession of disappointed guests. Ethan stood alone in the parking circle for a long moment, staring up at the manor. At me, though he probably couldn't see me through the tinted windows. Then he too left, climbing into his car and driving away from the venue he'd chosen for his new beginning. By 2 p.m., the Ashford Manor was completely empty except for me and the security team stationed at the gates. I walked back down to the terrace. The lake reflected the afternoon sun, turning the water into liquid gold. The lawn where chairs should have held guests stood empty, green and perfect, and entirely mine. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Mom says you're either a genius or need therapy. Maybe both. Love you, sis, I typed back. Definitely both. But I'm okay. Another message came through, this one from an unknown number. This isn't over. You'll regret this. Ethan and I stared at it for a long moment, then blocked the number. There was nothing left to say to him. Nothing he could threaten me with. He'd shown me exactly who he was, and I'd simply returned the favor. But there was one more message waiting, this one from Monica, the venue coordinator. I've worked hundreds of weddings, and I've never seen anything like today. But between you and me, he deserved it. She did too. I hope you find someone who loves you for real. I sat on the terrace steps, designer dress and all, and let myself feel everything I'd been holding back for months. The pain of betrayal, the anger of being discarded, the relief of finally having control. And underneath it all, the quiet satisfaction of a plan executed perfectly. The story broke on local news that evening. Mysterious heiress shuts down ex-fiancé's wedding in real estate power move. By Monday, it had gone viral. Business Insider called for an interview. The New York Times ran a think piece on women, wealth, and revenge in the modern age. I declined all interviews, but I did issue one statement through my company's PR team. Sometimes the best response to betrayal is not revenge, but truth. I revealed nothing that wasn't already real. I simply stopped pretending to be less than I was. Ethan and Victoria did attempt to sue. The case was thrown out within 6 weeks. My legal team had ensured every action was by the book, every refund properly processed, every contract legally terminated. The architectural firm where Ethan worked quietly let him go 3 months later. Victoria's law firm transferred her to their Denver office. I heard through Emma, who heard through the social media grapevine, that they'd broken up by Christmas. Turns out planning a wedding reveals character, but having one spectacularly canceled reveals even more. As for me, I kept the Ashford Manor, not out of spite, but because it really was beautiful. I hosted my first event there in September, a charity gala for my father's foundation, raising money for small businesses threatened by corporate acquisition. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. I stood on that same terrace in a deep burgundy gown, champagne in hand, surrounded by genuine friends who'd known me before the reveal. Emma stood beside me, shaking her head in amazement. You know you're kind of a legend now, right? The woman who bought a venue just to cancel her ex's wedding? That's not why I bought it, I corrected. No? I looked out over the lake, remembering that day 18 months ago when Ethan and I had toured this place. How excited I'd been. How sure. I bought it because I loved it. Because I could. Because I was tired of making myself smaller to fit someone else's idea of who I should be. I turned to my sister. The cancellation was just A bonus. Emma clinked her glass against mine. To bonuses, then. And to never pretending to be poor again. I'll drink to that. As the gala continued below us, real people, real connections, real conversations, my phone buzzed one last time. An email from a wedding blog requesting my story for their Most Dramatic Wedding Fails series. I deleted it without responding. Because this wasn't a failure. This was me, finally, taking up the space I'd always deserved. And if Ethan was somewhere out there, regretting the day he handed back my grandmother's ring, assuming I had nothing worth keeping, well, that was his problem now. Not mine. I had a venue to run, a company to manage, and a life to live without apology. The Ashford Manor stood as my monument, not to revenge, but to the simple, powerful truth that some things are worth reclaiming, even if you have to buy them back yourself. 3 months later. The wedding invitation was cream-colored this time, simple and elegant. You are cordially invited to the wedding of Emma Reeves and Jonathan Park at the Ashford Manor. My sister had called me crying when John proposed. Terrified I'd say no to hosting their wedding at that venue. I'd said yes immediately, because the Ashford Manor was never about Ethan and Victoria. It was never even about revenge. It was about reclaiming beauty from pain, about transforming a moment of almost happiness into actual joy. And as I stood on that terrace again, this time as the maid of honor, watching my sister marry someone who loved her for exactly who she was, I finally understood what I'd been searching for all along. Not revenge, not vindication, just the freedom to be fully, completely, unapologetically myself. The lake glittered in the sunset. The chairs were full of people who mattered. And when Emma turned to me with tears in her eyes and whispered, "Thank you," I knew I'd made the right choice. Sometimes buying a venue isn't about canceling a wedding. Sometimes it's about building the life you deserve, one property acquisition at a time. And if your ex happens to be caught in the crossfire, well, that's just good planning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.